Some people say they hate people. They say it casually, sometimes jokingly, sometimes with quiet seriousness. But psychologically, very few people truly hate humanity itself. What they often hate is something far more specific: the emotional cost of being around others. People who describe themselves as hating people are rarely aggressive, cruel, or antisocial by nature. In fact, many of them are deeply perceptive, emotionally aware, and once cared far more than they now allow themselves to show. What looks like bitterness on the surface is often exhaustion underneath. Social interaction demands constant adjustment, reading tone, interpreting intent, managing expectations, filtering what can be said versus what should be withheld. For some minds, this process is draining rather than stimulating. Over time, repeated exposure to shallow conversation, social performance, dishonesty, or emotional inconsistency creates a quiet aversion, not toward people, but toward the psychological effort required to engage with them. These individuals are often highly sensitive to incongruence. They notice when words don't match behavior, when friendliness is performative, when kindness has conditions. While others move past these details, they accumulate, and eventually the mind concludes that withdrawal is safer than constant interpretation. Another common pattern is emotional fatigue. People who hate people often gave too much of themselves early in life, emotionally, socially, or mentally. They listened, they supported, they tried to understand. When those efforts were not reciprocated or were repeatedly taken for granted, the nervous system learned a lesson. Closeness equals depletion. So the mind adapts. Instead of anger, it chooses distance. Instead of confrontation, it chooses silence. Instead of connection, it chooses control. This withdrawal is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It simply reduces exposure. Social situations that others enjoy, gatherings, group chats, constant communication, can feel overstimulating rather than fulfilling. Not because these individuals lack social skill, but because their threshold for meaningless interaction is low. They prefer fewer connections with more depth. And when depth isn't available, absence feels more honest. There is also a strong relationship between this mindset and self-preservation. People who hate people often value psychological safety more than social belonging. They have learned that being alone does not equal loneliness, while being surrounded by others can feel deeply isolating. Importantly, this is not misanthropy in the philosophical sense. It is selective disengagement. These individuals are not opposed to humanity. They are selective about access to their inner world. They don't want to explain themselves repeatedly. They don't want to justify boundaries. They don't want to dilute their thoughts to fit a group dynamic. Their dislike is rarely directed outward. It is inwardly protective. Another overlooked factor is expectation collapse. Many people grow up believing that social bonds will be fair, mutual, and meaningful. When reality contradicts that belief repeatedly, through betrayal, disappointment, or emotional imbalance, the mind recalibrates. It lowers expectations, then lowers exposure, then lowers attachment. From the outside, this can look like cynicism. From the inside, it feels like clarity. These individuals often enjoy solitude, not as an escape, but as a return to equilibrium. Alone, they don't have to perform emotional labor. They don't have to manage impressions. They don't have to translate themselves. Their thoughts can exist without interruption. This is why many of them are creative, analytical, or deeply introspective. Their mental energy is conserved rather than spent socially. They think more than they speak, observe more than they react, and while they may seem detached, they are often quietly processing the world with intensity. However, there is a cost. Prolonged withdrawal can harden into rigidity if left unexamined. Disliking people can become a default stance rather than a conscious boundary. When protection turns into avoidance, opportunities for genuine connection shrink. Not all social interaction is draining. Not all people require self-erasure to engage with. The psychological challenge for these individuals is discernment, not isolation. Learning when to open the door slightly, without surrendering control, is a skill, not a betrayal of self. Because at the core of this pattern is not hatred, it is sensitivity. It is fatigue. It is the desire to remain intact. If you recognize yourself in this, you are not broken. You are responding logically to your experiences. But awareness matters, because distancing yourself from harm is healthy. Distancing yourself from everything is limiting. You don't need to love people. You don't need to trust everyone. But you don't need to disappear either. Sometimes the healthiest relationship with humanity is a filtered one. And if this perspective resonates with you, if you've ever felt misunderstood for needing distance, consider subscribing to the channel. Here, we explore the psychology behind quiet minds, emotional boundaries, and the inner mechanisms that shape how we relate to the world. You don't hate people, you hate unnecessary exposure, and that distinction matters more than most realize.